Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the second day. Actually, we're day number 3 already. Day number 3, the day of action for the second National Asian Heritage Month Symposium. And we are here gathered today to meet on this land. As you see in front of us, this is not necessarily the land where you were born, but we would like for you to honor the land where you are right now. And so what we're going to do today is a little bit different than what we've done in the past. As you know, as I've been giving these talks, and as well as all the other hosts, we've always done a version of a land acknowledgement. But as you know from the talk yesterday that we had with our elders that we had in place, that we have to give thanks and we have to remember that thanks. And it's not just a momentary and fleeting thing, we want to continue to remember. So with that idea of remembrance in mind, we're gonna take just 30 seconds of this talk, just for a moment of silence for you to think about all of the things that you are thankful and you are grateful for, and all those words that Denadoga told us yesterday. So just 30 seconds of your time starting now. Thank you very much for that. And I hope that you remember to continue to move beyond acknowledgement and not an acknowledgement itself. So today we are here for the keynote speech. My name is Farah Fancy. I'm the project manager and I'm your host for today. And we were supposed to be joined by a really prominent person in the Asian Canadian community, but unfortunately he was not able to make it today. So instead we're joined by Lisa Ndejuru. We are lucky to have her today. We are all actually very honored that she is able to make it today on such short notice. So that's absolutely amazing. So Lisa is a transdisciplinary PhD candidate at Concordia University. She's a skilled practitioner of playback theater. She's also co-founded the Montreal Living History Ensemble. She was born in Rwanda and she served the Rwandan diaspora in North America for more than 20 years as an organizer, as an artist, also as a storyteller. And she's been experimenting with storytelling and play and improvised theater, aiming for individuals and collective meaning, making and empowering in the aftermath after large-scale political violence. And right now she's currently working on a story on uncovering all the stories of her ancestry. So Lisa, thank you very much for joining us today and welcome to the symposium.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the Festival Accès Asie for inviting me. Thank you, Farah, for inviting me. I've known Farah for a number of years now. I've heard that you were going to be speaking to Lisa tomorrow as well. And I've been working with Lisa also for a very long time. And so I cherish the connections that that this place affords us to make across cultures and across disciplines and across time. I'm seated on the territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka. So I think this is Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. I know that you are all over Turtle Island, and I say hello. The picture you are seeing here is a picture that I've been carrying around, and it's a picture of a little place in East Africa, in Rwanda, where I come from. And I'll tell you about it a little bit further along the line. It's the picture that when Farah said, come and tell us about the things that you've been working on, and the things that I've been working on are stories of the past and how to rework or work through the stories of the past and shape the stories of our future. That has been my work for the past, I don't know, 20 years now? Yeah. So My name is Lisa Ndejuru. I'm the daughter of Aimable Ndejuru, the son of Ndejuru Claver, the son of Nguije, the son of Karenzi, the son of Gitondo, the son of Karorero, the son of Kiunangoma, the son of Rwiru, the son of Murahire, the son of Hongori, the son of Makara. And it goes on and on and on for generations like this. All the way to Kigwa, who is the ancestors of Rwanda as we know it today. The same story goes for my mother's side of the generation, of the family. And that's how we used to introduce ourselves in Rwanda, back by our location within a certain lineage. So I'm a daughter of the clan of the Abega of Makara. So there's a branch of Hongori. And I'm a product of an unbroken Rwandan history that can be traced for more than 1,000 years. Here on Turtle Island, I am not a guest. I am, if I were to call myself a guest, it would mean someone invited me here, but I showed up uninvited. And it's something that I'm working through. So how do we work through, how do I work through this sharing of the land, the dwelling here? That's an ongoing question. I haven't lived through colonization in Rwanda, nor have I been persecuted there in the 1950s or 60s or 70s or 90s. I was born there, but I was raised in Germany and then here in Canada. I haven't been raised in refugee camps, nor have I gone to war in the 1990s. I was not in Rwanda to experience the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, nor its aftermath. I was here already, miles away. And yet most of my adult life has been spent thinking, writing, dancing, performing, working through different parts of this history, because all of it is what is the stories and the silences of my family. That is what my family and my community is made of. And so I had the last 15 years have been this amazing opportunity to work through stories of the past, not only our Rwandan stories, but stories with other communities here in Canada. So stories with the Cambodian community, stories with the Jewish community, stories with the Haitian community, stories. There were 4 stories. It was a Community University Research Alliance project that was based at Concordia University. And it was held at the Center for Oral History and Digital Storytelling. And it was led by Dr. Stephen High. So from 2005 to 2012, it was this amazing community university collaboration where over 400 people came together, community groups, researchers, artists, many artists, working on our stories. So each their own story, but then we were listening to each other's stories too, right? And so it was a work of life stories. So the story that you as a living person can share your own story, but then also the memories you have, the memories of your father, your grandfather. Were there links? Were there not links? Were there stories? Were there silences? And listening to the stories from I feel as though one of the big reasons why I joined this project was because I felt as though there were so many silences in our family community. We are we were, I felt, a lot like this field. So this field is a field in Rwanda that we photographed in 2011 with my husband when we went there. And it's a very sort of pretty field. It's a very sort of peaceful field. It's the field where it is said that my grandfather's body was thrown in the 1960s when he was assassinated. So this was before the 1994 genocide. It was the beginning of the persecutions back in the day against the Tutsi in Rwanda. And so it wasn't a story that was talked about much. So I'm not a survivor of 1994. I am the grandchild of someone who was killed in the 1960s, right? And yet his story was, or the way it ended so abruptly, this fact that, you know, his story, he was shot, but his body was never found. And the fear around my family and the way that they had to organize after that has profoundly influenced the way we are 2 generations, 3 generations later, right? And so this idea of this field, we look a lot like this field, you know, like a lot of high achievers, high performers. You can't know that underneath the surface, there's all of this history, all of these stories, right? And yet, to me, it felt as though to me, it has felt as though working through those stories has allowed us to come to a place where actually the feeling that we carry is as peaceful as that outlook. There is an acceptance of what has come before that is now allowed us to come to a place of, and of course it's not even across the board. Some people feel it more, some people feel it less, but it feels as though not only have these memories allowed us, opened up a treasure trove. We can work on these stories. I can work on these stories for the rest of my life. This has been the opportunity to find more stories of ancient Rwanda, so pre-colonial Rwanda, right, that have been transcribed in the 50s, for example. And so the origin story of Kigwa, for example, that ancestor, goes something like, I don't think I will have time to tell you the story of Kigwa, but so there are, for a postdoc, for example, I will have the opportunity to go into those different stories that might not make sense here on Turtle Island today for anybody, but I'm playing with these stories with my friends. I'm playing with Farah, I'm playing with Ula. Ula's German. I'm playing with Ramona. Ramona is Israeli. I'm playing with lots of different people who also have stories. Yesterday I was walking with my son, my son Ziga, he's 7. And we went to McGill Park just in front of the university, and there was a powwow for the indigenous students. And so usually it's a big celebration, but with COVID, they had reduced it quite a bit. And so we're sitting in the grass and we're looking at the powwow and listening to the drums. They're very different drums from our drums, with their drums and there's dancing and there's celebration. And my son was wondering, can I also be Mohawk? And I said, whoa, this is not how this works. You can't just decide to be. And so how do we start these conversations about who are you, right? So I told him back when I started working with the story of the first story, the story of Kigwa. So the story of Kigwa starts with this woman. She was a queen who couldn't have a child. She was her husband's favorite, but she couldn't have a child, and she was very sad, and so she didn't know what to do. And then a woman came, and the woman said, I can tell you what to do to have a child. So the queen said, what? And the woman said, well, take me into your home, feed me and clothe me, and take me under your protection, and I will tell you what to do. And so it was done. The queen said, come. Now what? Now you have to put a big calabash on the bed near the wall. The queen was like, okay, it was done. Now what? Now, she said, now. And she whispered to the queen, and she said, now, what we have to do is when the seers will have sacrificed the multicolored bull, we will have to go, while they're deliberating, we will have to go and take the heart still attached to the lungs. And then I will tell you what to do. The queen was like, okay. So when the day of the ritual came, and the two women managed to get to the bull, the seers had gone to deliberate, and they managed to take out the heart with the lungs still attached, and they left back into the chambers of the queen. The queen by then was like, okay, that's it. Now what? Now we have to put it into the calabash. They put it into the calabash. Now what? Now you have to put milk on it, pour milk on it, morning and night. The queen is like, okay, but how long? For how long? And the lady said, for the time a woman is pregnant. Okay, and so they did. So it goes on like this for a while, but at one point, 9 months later, the queen hears a sound. She's with her husband, the king, and then she sends him away, and she runs to the calabash, and she takes out this beautiful, beautiful child and names him Kigwa. Kigwa was gorgeous. So she's in love with this child. The king comes back and says, who's this? It's a child. I have given birth. Congratulate me. And he's like, what? How? You weren't expecting? And she says, a woman is always expecting. And so her husband got so upset. So upset, and he wouldn't calm down no matter what she did. So she called the lady, that servant. She says, she gave him the child, and she goes, take the child, bring him to my mother up country so that he can be safe, right? For the time that his how do you say, that his father will, at one point his father will have calmed down. Well, so it was. The story continues like this, but I've told to come back here, sorry, to come back here, I've told Ziga this story about Kigwa and the bull, and so when I performed this story in Rwanda last summer at the Uwunhu Festival, he was there, and I end the story by going up our family tree all the way to Kigwa, right? And so he counted, right? He goes, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 23, my 23th great grandfather is a bull. And so I was like, is that what I want him to? I'm not sure that this is what I want him to. But I love the idea that among the stories that he has, he has that story too, and that we can play with it and talk about it. When we were together at Concordia, I think it was last year or the year before, the artist called Skawanadi is a Mohawk artist, and she works with machinima, and she retold the story of Sky Woman, and it's a story called "She Falls for Ages," or she falls through the ages. She falls for ages, I think, and it's this beautiful, beautiful story where she takes the story of Sky Woman into the future, and she makes us all land on the turtle's back today, and it's such a gift as a and I remember Ziga gathering that story and the bull story and all the other stories that he's going to, Little Red Riding Hood, they're all going to be there. But if we can unearth those stories and love those stories and value those stories and fill the space with all of these stories, then what will we be able to do? What becomes possible in terms of the kinds of images visually that we find, the kind of ideas that we come up, the kind of possibilities, the kinds of wisdoms, so all of these, I don't know. And as artists, I find that we find ourselves in this really amazingly wealthy, this wealth of story, of heritage, of culture, even of wounds, right? Because a lot of these things is about working through the wounds to be present here now, but we're not going to forget because we heal, right? So yeah, so I don't know, have I gone over time?
No, you're fine.
Yeah, so I'm wondering what the kinds of stories are that you hold and that you want to be working on going forward.
Thank you very much for that, Lisa. If there's anybody in the audience who would like to ask some questions, you can drop it in the chat or ask in the question box. But in the meantime, I wanted to ask Lisa, can you offer any advice to the people today who are trying to create some action towards recognizing and maintaining their Asian Canadian heritage?
I know how important it is. I'm an artist, I'm a psychotherapist, I'm a scholar, because I felt as though I needed to pull from all these different things to make life here, right? Like I feel like we have a lot of trauma to work through. We have a lot of, but I feel like the arts is the place where we can integrate, and across cultures, religions. It used to be that societies were these, often a religion would be sort of like an integrator, a social integrator, where all these differences could become one. We could become a we through the religion. But how do we make a we in this very plural space without cutting ourselves off from the things that we are? And so how do we show up with all of who we are, right? And we have children that are of us. We have children who are mixed, right? And they have to be allowed to be all of these different things, right? And so to me, not only it's vital that we are able to access the stories and the silences, because the silences is not any, like, you can be connected or disconnected. It doesn't matter, right? Like if you start a journey, you start pulling on something and it will take you to somewhere else and to somewhere else, and it ends up being there where you are. And so I find that a child growing up, in order for the children to be able to make of themselves all that they can be, they have to be able to ask us all of the questions that have to do with identity, right? And all of those pieces of who they are. And it's a very interesting thing because nobody does it at the same rhythm, but at one point, you know, around adolescence, it comes up. In young adulthood, when you have to make a family or make those choices, if you decide to have children or raise them, what are the values that you're going to, there are milestones in our lives where these things are going to allow us to stand. And I think that if we can have one of the things that was amazing that I found was during the project, after 20 years, so in 2014, the project was over, but the Rwandan community decided to, because they saw that that people weren't necessarily better, survivors of the genocide, people weren't necessarily better 20 years later than they were right when it ended. And so they decided to go to their elders, so the Armenian community, the Jewish community, the Cambodian community, and they said like, okay, you've gone through this genocide experience, how are you coping? And so sometimes it was with working with descendants of, right? Like the Armenians, it's been 100 years, right? And so it was like these communities sitting around the table. So we did this for 2 days. People were sitting around the table and sharing, you know, how this experience has been experienced and how are they coping, right? And across these different things. And what came out of after 16 years, and I've listened to those tapes over and over, was this idea about how every community, no matter the religion, every community, what they care about the most is their children. And how do they translate the heritage, how do they share the pride of the heritage without transmitting the pain? Enough, and it was strange because the pain often is what is imagined to be the thing that will allow the young to keep fighting for whatever it needs to be fighting for, right? Like the devoir de mémoire, or devoir de mémoire in English would be the need to remember. But I don't think that we need, in a way, I don't think that we necessarily need to make it a painful thing. I don't necessarily think that people need to remember out of pain. I think that there's a gift, there are gifts in the tastes and the languages and the you know, the fabrics, the know-how, the ideas, the people, the influences. It's so rich. We live in a world of constant innovation. Innovation is not an abstract thing. All the artists know this. You create from things. And so that means that coming together this way, we bring this enormous wealth of possibilities for weaving old things in new ways. And the more well we are, the more momentum we have to go forward.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the thoughts that I was thinking about is how at the beginning of this talk, I was offering that we do a 30 seconds moment of silence, or 30 seconds of silence, not exactly a moment, of thinking of what we're grateful for. But I'm hoping that the goal of what we can get to with the actions is that it's not just a moment of silence, because we have been silenced for so long with all of the colonization that has happened to us and all of the challenges that we face just navigating and trying to find our place in this uninvited territory that we're sitting in right now. And so the goal is that eventually, if we work together to create these actions in these breakout spaces today, that instead of a moment of silence, that we have a moment of stillness, so that we can watch the garden in front of us grow and flourish, and we can watch our children and their children grow in front of us in stillness, with the gratitude of everything that has come before us, as well as everything that is underneath that ground, all that history, all that blood, all of that sacrifice of everything that's seeped into the fabric of who we are as an individual, as well as the soil and the ground and everything that's growing out from it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I like the idea of stillness because it's from there that you can listen into what comes next, right? Like there's sort of like it's almost like a neutral point, and then something emerges and you can engage with it again, right? Like there's something really interesting about that idea of stillness, of sort of being available for what unfolds, what's coming next. That's quite beautiful. I like that. Yeah.
So I know for you, what's coming next is you are unearthing these stories to help this garden grow. Did you want to tell a little bit about some of the stories, or how many stories you're accumulating, and how you hope that the youth can use it later on?
So I can tell you about I think that there's something that is very, that there's always fear, right? About what are old, dusty stories that nobody, I mean, isn't it that if nobody's looking at them, isn't it for a reason type thing, right? Like maybe nobody cares about them anymore, and nobody will care about them anymore. But I really like those stories. I want to know, they're written in a language that we don't know anymore. I don't speak my language anymore. I don't speak my, and that is something that I feel as though I can, today, it's no longer my parents' responsibility, right? If I want to learn my language, I can just go and learn it, right? My sister has gone back to Rwanda and she's speaking it. And so I'm very motivated to learning the language because there's so much wealth in it. But in the stories, so these stories are written in a language that only a few people can speak. And so there's something about putting back meanings and multiple meanings, right? Like, for example, the drum is not just the drum. The drum is power, right? The drum is a symbol of a reign, of an era, of an idea that carries a moment, right? And so that is a really interesting idea. So what could we do? Like, I mean, the possibilities are endless, right? There are wisdoms. These stories were used back in the day. The stories that I've been working with were used back in the day in the court, in traditional Rwanda. So they were held by different people. So different people held these different stories. And so there too, there's something about, you know, who held them, why, and why were they chunked up this way? And there's some things that I'm going to find out, and there's some things that I won't be able to know because nobody knows them anymore. And that's fine. I can acknowledge those, it makes you think of those, there's you know, there's that Japanese craft of breaking and putting together with gold. Mm-hmm. There's something about acknowledging breakage, valuing breakage, and continuing, right? Continuing to hold, to pass on, to, it's like, it's infinite. It's infinite. I feel as though I haven't ended any one of my sentences.
Yeah, no, that idea of kintsugi, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, kintsugi. It's that idea that when pottery breaks, that you can repair it with gold filling, because the breakages actually makes it more beautiful. So and the more breakages that you have, that's what creates even more beauty and more uniqueness. And in fact, when it's re-repaired with the gold, the original pottery that there was becomes stronger than what it was before. So we have to try to find strength as Asian Canadians to find how we can use these breakages that have happened in our past and how we can build beyond that to create a greater future for our children. And so again, we want to maintain our Asian heritage, and at the same time, we want to be in solidarity, like we were talking about the theme yesterday. Actually, speaking of which, we've got Martin Croft, who's given a comment here. He said, as indigenous people, our ancient stories, such as our creation story, the peacemaker's epic, and the establishment of the great peace continues to inform our art. And after generations of colonial damage, they persist because of their power. So it's so comforting to know that there are others experiencing a similar cultural journey. So across indigeneity, across global indigeneity, we are finding that we're facing the exact same stories. And so it's just a question of connecting these ideas together so that we can work together to support each other and create these actions. And these actions might be just a simple spark. They don't have to be something where we come up with a grant proposal. It's just a simple spark that leads to one thing and the next and the next. It's that potential energy. There's also a chat message from Leticia saying, Kintsugi is a Japanese art of putting broken pottery pieces back together with gold. Yes, that's exactly what we were talking together about before. And yesterday we had an architect online who was also talking about different Japanese and also other Southeast Asian concepts, Southeast Asian and East Asian concepts that he's using in his architectural design. So he also refers to some of those types of imagery as well. But it's something else that I just wanted to mention is that yesterday I was speaking with Barbara Daiwo via the chat, and she's a First Nations hoop dancer here. And she was supposed to be with us this weekend, but she was participating in a different event. So she was excited to be watching some of the things online that was happening with this national symposium. And she was like, yeah, she's like, okay, this weekend, we've got so many Indigenous people who are online, whether they're Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, or Inuit, or they're Indigenous from our own cultures and our own background. And so it's great that we're seeing more visibility for all these Indigenous people, as well as all of the people who come after the Pioklen Indigenous, the ones who are mixed, and the ones who are interested in maintaining this Indigenous culture, all the stakeholders that we talk about to help us maintain our culture and also guide us so that we can continue to grow, and those ones who listen to our guidance that we can offer to the others so that we can grow and connect, and we can again create more solidarity so that we can create more understanding and societies and cultures of respect.
What I love the most, I think, about the way that you set up this gathering is that you have indigenous indigenous elders and commentators who can say when to, who can comment about what is being done, but also when to stop and when to come, because I find that it's one of the things that are very, very delicate is to speak to indigeneity on the land here, on Turtle Island, because we can't ever break solidarity with the indigenous people or water down the struggle that they are going through. We need to ally from the places where we know what colonization is, right? As new settlers in a way, because we are not indigenous, right? Then how do we, oftentimes we're not calculated in the battle that goes on between indigenous and the white settler, for example. But the reason that we are immigrants in a way is that so we can weigh in we swear allegiance to the queen when we're immigrants, right? We don't swear allegiance to, and so there's something there that I think that is so important to think about and to think with and to think through. And I find that we can't do it in abstraction. I think that it's in the relationships that we have with indigenous people that we can actually make those actions that make sense, because we're going to make them with the people that are
The caretakers of this land. That's right. Like, so the First Nations, Métis and Inuit, folks who are indigenous to this land, it's different than, say, for myself. I'm from two tribes. I'm mixed, like pure one side, pure the other side of two tribes. So when I'm in the territory that is known now as Pakistan, I experience all kinds of racism. I experience all kinds of stereotypes, assumptions, because I'm an indigenous person. But at the same time, I'm a not indigenous person to this territory. So it's always that negotiation that we're creating between our own heritage and where we are now and where we're living. And that even is further complicated by our children. And how do we pass on our stories? How much of those stories do we pass on? And how much of it do we let go and just let it settle under the earth? It's always a question for us. And so that's something just to keep in mind today when we're doing these breakout sessions, is that we're going to be thinking about that what do we want to maintain for our children, and what is it time that we need to maybe keep for ourselves, so that, because we still need to process it, we still need to make sure that we're holding its hand, whatever it is, and what is it that it's time to let go of, that we've had those conversations and now we need to move beyond that. We need to move beyond into the doing. And with that, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us today, Lisa. Again, for those of you who are expecting Justin Poi, he's a very busy man and he's a huge advocate for Asian Canadian heritage. His mother, some of you who maybe know, Senator Vivian Poi, was the one who instituted the Asian Canadian Heritage Month. And of course, with the help of many other people. And Justin is accessible. He is very much interested in what we've been doing. He's been guiding us all along and giving us his advice and input through a think tank that we had initiated. And unfortunately, he just wasn't able to make it today. But we thank Justin for the time and the intention of being here today with us as well. And again, Lisa, thank you so much for speaking today. Thank you to all the participants who are here watching, as well as on the replay. And for those participants who are here who have not yet registered for your specific breakout session, please do go and look at the themes today, as well as know that there's one theme that is an open topic. So that open topic can arise from the group who is present during that particular meeting. So maybe there's not a theme that is particularly interesting for you at the moment and in the regional location you're in. Maybe there's something different that you want to speak about, that you can create these actions for yourself and future generations down the line. So once again, we'll be having those breakout sessions this afternoon. There's 3 in one block, there's 3 in another. And again, we've got our First Nations reflections that are going to be happening later on. And tomorrow we'll be summarizing everything that we've been doing today, and we'll be joined by speaker Lisa Sajnani. So thank you very much, Lisa.
Nisha,
and thank
Nisha.
you. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. I'm looking at your name. Nisha Sajnani. Thank you for that correction. Lisa, you know that I'm a flawsome person. I'm flawed, just like everybody else is. Thank you and have a great day, everybody.
Take good care.